My father didn't even clear his throat before doing it. He just pushed a polished folder across the table and said my sister's name like it was a promise. Lena had been home for 7 days. I'd carried my parents for 10 years. My mother's nod was the loudest thing in the room. I didn't argue. I didn't even blink. I placed the power of attorney beside the house keys, the metal clinking sharp enough to cut the silence. Everyone thought I was surrendering, but when Lena opened the letter I'd left for her, she didn't read it twice. She couldn't. I grew up in hallways that smelled like antiseptic and lavender, their lights humming softly overhead. My father walked ahead of me with long, confident strides, greeting every resident by name. I used to trail behind him, pushing a wheelchair I was too small for, standing on my toes just to keep it straight. The metal would rattle and he'd glance back with a smile that never quite landed. "Careful, Kara," he'd say. Then turn back to the person he wanted to impress. Lena didn't trail behind anyone. She floated. Dresses that swayed, curls that caught the light laughter that pulled eyes toward her like gravity. My mother posed her in doorways and beside holiday decorations, posting photos with captions about our bright future. I sometimes appeared in the background of those pictures, half-cut, holding a clipboard, or wiping a spill no one noticed but me. Even as kids, the division felt rehearsed. Lena got the dance shoes, the summer camps, the weekend trips to unlock her potential. I got responsibility. Kara's independent, my parents told everyone, as if independence were something I was born with rather than shaped into. When Lena complained about her homework, they hired a tutor. When I brought home straight A's, my father nodded without looking up from his laptop. "Expected from you." There was one birthday I remember clearly. Lena's cake had sparklers, gold balloons, and a dozen relatives crowding around her. Mine, 2 months later, was a sheet cake from the grocery store left on the kitchen counter, half frosted and already leaning. My mother kissed my cheek and reminded me to grab my work uniform before heading to the facility for an evening shift. I was 16. The shift wasn't required, the mortgage was. I didn't resent Lena then. She wasn't the one who set the rules. She simply thrived under them. But I learned early that wanting anything made me inconvenient. So I stopped wanting. I filled medication drawers, folded towels, helped residents write holiday cards. I became the girl who solved problems quietly, whose usefulness erased the need for praise. By the time I reached adulthood, the pattern had hardened. Lena left for the city to build a career in creative media, a dream my parents spoke of with reverence. When she called home, it was usually to ask for money. They always sent it. Meanwhile, my father fell ill, then my mother. The business faltered. Staff left. Regulations tightened. And the person they turned to was not the daughter they'd invested in. It was me. I signed the power of attorney on a vinyl hospital chair at 2 a.m, my mother nodding as if this were inevitable. "You're good with the serious things," she whispered. It wasn't a compliment. It was confirmation of a role I'd never asked for. Some nights after long shifts, I'd catch my reflection in the facility's glass doors, straight posture, hair tied back, tablet in hand. I didn't look like someone in her 20s. I looked like someone who had already lived a life. I remember thinking even then that this was my place. Not chosen, assigned. That was the day I understood what my family believed. Lena was the face. I was the scaffolding. The shift came quietly, the way storms crawl in before anyone notices the sky has changed. At first, it was small things. An email chain I usually handled about state inspections arrived without my name attached. Then another about a staffing audit. Then a meeting scheduled at the office succession planning, one I only heard about because a nurse asked why I wasn't presenting the operational report. I remember standing in the supply room, the air cold from the refrigeration unit, holding a box of wound dressings. My phone buzzed. A photo from my mother. Lena standing in front of the facility sign, smiling, her hair lifted by the wind. The caption, "Future Leadership." I stared at it long enough for the screen to dim. Another message followed, an invitation graphic, a family legacy celebration, gold lettering, a date, a location, no mention of my role, no consultation, just a card placed in my mailbox like a formality. That evening, I walked into my parents' kitchen. The air smelled like roasted peppers. My father stood by the counter speaking softly to Lena about vision-fresh ideas the next decade. My mother leaned against the island nodding. I waited for them to acknowledge me. They didn't. When my father finally noticed I was there, he offered a distracted smile. Kara, don't worry about the administrative stuff right now. You've done enough heavy lifting. It's time for Lena to take on bigger responsibilities. The word bigger echoed. Lena stood with her arms crossed, a polite smile on her lips, as if she were preparing for a stage entrance rather than a job. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came. My fingers tightened around the edge of my tablet. My mother reached over, touched my wrist lightly. You're good with the behind-the-scenes things, she said. Let her shine. Behind the scenes. The phrase landed heavier than anything else. Later that night, I found another folder on the dining table, financial projections drafted in Lena's handwriting, numbers inaccurate, proposals impossible, yet my parents had signed their initials in the corner. They had already decided. I sat down, the chair legs scraping softly against the floor. My breath steadied, thin but controlled. I looked at the papers again and felt something inside me settle, not break. I just smiled. I didn't react that night. I didn't argue or correct the numbers or remind them who had kept the system alive for a decade. I simply closed the folder, placed it back exactly where I found it, and walked upstairs. Each step felt steady, almost weightless, like I was leaving gravity behind. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed. The walls were the same pale blue from my childhood, faded, familiar, indifferent. I kept my tablet beside me and let the dim screen glow across my hands. The house was quiet except for Lena's laugh drifting up the staircase, airy and bright, as if she had already stepped into her new role. I opened a blank document. No headings, no emotion, just space. Then I began. The first entry was a timeline. 10 years condensed into bullet points. Medical emergencies, regulatory freezes, staffing shortages, the year we almost lost Medicaid support. Every crisis I stepped into because no one else knew how. The second entry was structural, licenses, compliance standards, vendor contracts, hospital partnerships. I listed the names of every person who relied on the system, not the property to function, the inspectors who trusted my reports, the physicians who approved our care protocols, the caseworkers who called me, not my parents, when families panicked. I didn't need to build a case. The case already existed. All I had to do was assemble it. The next morning before sunrise, I drove across Savannah, the streets quiet and washed in a faint gray. I parked outside Dr. Hale's office. He was already awake, lights on, kettle steaming in the window. When he opened the door, he didn't ask why I was there. He simply stepped aside. His office smelled like cedar and old books, a place where truth arrived without theatrics. I placed my notes on the table. He read silently, glasses sliding down his nose, turning each page slowly as if measuring weight rather than words. When he finished, he leaned back. They're moving without you. I nodded. And you're done asking to be seen. Another nod. He tapped the edge of my timeline. You don't need revenge. You need structure. That afternoon, he called Ms. Rowan. She arrived with a leather portfolio under her arm and the kind of calm that comes from decades of navigating systems people underestimate. She reviewed everything I brought: contracts, emails, compliance logs, my power of attorney papers. She scanned each page with quick precision, lips tightening only when the numbers Lena drafted came up. They're planning a transfer, she said, but they don't understand what they're transferring. Explain it, I told her. She pointed at the licenses first. This is the real spine. Without it, the facilities are buildings, nothing more. Then she tapped the compliance protocols I'd written. This is intellectual property. You created it. Finally, she held up the summary of our partnerships. This is institutional capital. It follows the system, not the name. I sat very still. You can protect your work, she continued. Not with emotion, with boundaries. We spent the next week building a legal framework, a non-profit foundation designed to hold everything intangible: the brand, the protocols, the data system, the partnerships, not to own, but to safeguard. A structure that didn't serve a family image but the people in our care. Harbor Bridge Foundation. I chose the name quietly, a bridge built for those who needed steadiness. Under my authority as power of attorney, still fully valid, never rescinded, I executed each transfer with the precision of someone copying medication doses. Every document signed, notarized, filed. My parents, believing it was routine administrative cleanup for their health and business stability, signed honorary advisory roles without reading the fine lines. No ownership, no control. Just recognition for their name. When the work was done, I returned to operations as if nothing had changed. Moved through hallways, checked logs, adjusted schedules. Staff greeted me with the quiet respect of people who remembered who had kept them afloat. Lena drifted through rooms with a notebook and a soft smile offering color palette ideas for the website. My parents beamed every time she opened her mouth. The night before the legacy celebration, I sat alone in the small office tucked behind the nurse station. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. My tablet was open to one last document, a letter addressed to Lena. It wasn't angry or sharp. It wasn't an accusation. It was clarity. I wrote about what she was inheriting, a shell without the system, responsibility without preparation, a title without the backbone beneath it. I explained the foundation not to shame her, but to prepare her for the truth my parents refused to see. I ended with one line that felt like stepping out of a shadow. What you carry next depends on what you choose to hold. I printed the letter, folded it neatly, and slid it into a red envelope, a color that drew attention without noise. On the day of the celebration, I placed the envelope into my bag beside the keys and the POA document. 3 objects, 3 truths. This time, I wouldn't fix what they'd broken. This time, I would let the system speak for itself. The celebration looked warm from the doorway. Soft lights, crystal glasses, linen napkins folded like small, careful wishes. My parents stood near the head of the table, glowing in a way they hadn't in years. Lena sat between them, posture-perfect fingers grazing the stem of her glass as if she'd practiced for this moment. When my father tapped his spoon against a plate, the room quieted. His voice carried easily across the table. Thank you all for being here. Tonight, we honor the future of our family's work. He turned to Lena with a proud tilt of his chin. She's ready to lead. My mother nodded, lips curved into the soft smile she reserved for moments she believed were historic. She deserves it, she added. The words didn't sting. They simply confirmed everything I already understood. I waited until the applause faded. Then I stood. Not abruptly, not with force. Just enough for chairs to stop shifting and for conversations to fall silent. I placed 3 items on the table in front of me: the keys, the power of attorney document, and the red envelope. The keys made the smallest sound, a crisp metallic tap that cut through the room's warmth. My father frowned. Kara, this isn't necessary. I slid them gently toward Lena. It's all yours. Some guests smiled, mistaking it for grace. Others exchanged glances, sensing the wrong kind of stillness in the air. Lena reached for the envelope first. Her fingers traced its edge before slipping inside to unfold the letter. Her eyes skimmed the first lines, then sharpened. She flipped to the next page, then the next. Her breath caught. "What is this?" she whispered. No one answered. She read further, hands tightening around the paper knuckles, whitening. "No, this can't be right." Her voice rose thin and disbelieving. "You're joking." Her chair screeched backward as she stood. The room jolted with her. My father grabbed the papers from her hand. His face drained as he reached the section outlining the transfer's brand protocols, operational rights, the licensing agreements, all under Harbor Bridge Foundation. His fingers trembled. "Kara." "What did you do?" I didn't respond. My mother snatched a page, scanning it in quick, frantic bursts. This says we don't own any of this. That the facilities are buildings," I said quietly. "Just buildings." A hush fell. Even the clinking silverware stilled. In the far corner, Mr. Hayes, Harbor Bridge's attorney, rose from his chair. He had blended into the room until the moment he was needed. His voice was calm, even polite. "Everything in that packet is accurate. The transfers were executed 3 years ago, during the period when Ms. Kara Hart held full legal authority to act on behalf of her parents." My father's voice cracked. "Without our consent." With your signatures, Hayes replied gently. You both approved the documents at the time. We have medical verification and third-party oversight confirming the necessity. Lena looked from him to me, eyes wide, breath uneven. So what did they just give me? Hayes folded his hands. 2 aging properties and the debt tied to them. Anything more would require certification from Harbor Bridge. Certification is contingent upon meeting the care standards Ms. Hart designed. My mother shook her head. She can meet them. She can learn. Hayes lifted a single page. If staffing ratios drop, if safety protocols lapse, if any core process deviates by more than a small percentage, Harbor can revoke the license within 60 days. Without a license, the buildings cannot operate. My father's voice sank to a whisper. So, we have nothing. I didn't correct him. They had exactly what they valued: appearance without structure. Lena sank back into her seat, the letter limp in her hands. The confident posture she'd carried all evening, dissolved shoulders folding inward. I thought I was taking over something real. I finally spoke. You were. The system, the responsibility, the work. You just never saw it. Hayes closed the folder. This arrangement protects the seniors, protects the staff. It is not punitive. It is structural. My parents stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as the daughter who carried them, but as the person who no longer would. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stepped back from the table, the room's silence following me out the door. The system would speak from here. I didn't sleep that night. Not from guilt, there was nothing to feel guilty about, but because the house felt strangely quiet, without the weight of expectation pressing against the walls. My phone stayed dark on the nightstand. No alerts from staff, no late calls about medication errors, no reminders about inspections. The silence felt unfamiliar, like stepping into a room I didn't realize existed. By morning, the consequences had already begun to unfold. I saw them from a distance, not because I avoided them, but because I no longer belonged inside their orbit. The bank emails, the staff resignations, the compliance notices, none of it came to me. It all went exactly where responsibility had been placed. Still, I drove to the new Harbor Bridge Center before sunrise. The windows glowed a soft amber, reflecting the first light over the river. Inside, volunteers were setting up morning activities, their voices low and steady. Someone was tuning a piano in the recreation room. The notes drifted through the hallway like a quiet reminder that life continued even when families didn't. I walked into my office. The room was small, almost plain, but the morning light softened everything. The edges of the desk, the muted colors on the wall, the stack of folders I'd left the night before. I set down my keys and exhaled slowly, the breath dropping into the space like a final weight being released. Later that week, I saw my parents in a Medicaid waiting room. They sat together, hands clasped, staring straight ahead. They didn't see me walk by. I didn't pause. Not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to fix. A month later, during a site visit, I noticed Lena in one of the Allied facilities pushing a resident's wheelchair, her movements small and careful. She looked different without the spotlight. She didn't notice me. I let her have the moment. Some stories end with victory. Mine ended with space, clean, quiet, earned. For the first time, I wasn't carrying anything that wasn't mine. In the end, nothing dramatic followed. No shouting, no slammed doors, no final reckoning. Just a clean line drawn in quiet. Families fracture loudly, but boundaries settle like dust, soft, inevitable, impossible to sweep away once you finally stop pretending you're the one holding everything up. Freedom didn't come from winning. It came from stepping aside without looking back. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing at all. And sometimes the silence that follows is the only truth that ever mattered. If this story stayed with you, stay close. More are coming.